Welcome to The Walls Within, the mental journey to elite performance. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate. It is intended for private, non-commercial use, and the views presented by your hosts or guests do not reflect on any agency, company, or organization that they work for. Thanks for joining us today as we share personal stories of adversity, strength, and weakness. We're going to talk about how we've used the lessons of our journeys to focus our efforts on helping others. As we challenge ourselves to reach new heights, will we celebrate our victories while also learning from our failures and setbacks? How can we use our own network of supporters to build a path towards success for someone else? Joining us for episode 2 is Andrew Ladd of the Arizona Coyotes and a 2-time Stanley Cup champion with the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes and the 2010 Chicago Blackhawks. He's had an esteemed career playing for 6 NHL teams in more than 1,000 games. Today, he's going to share some personal stories and talk with us about an unparalleled program he and his wife Brandy started through the Ladd Foundation. 1616 is a 16-week mental, physical, and social well-being experience for youth hockey teams that blends real-life stories and on-ice drills from the best hockey players in the world with proven research-based curriculum and tools. My name is Dave Payalillo. I'm a 19-year U.S. Air Force fighter pilot, and I'm joined today by NHL veteran goaltender and 2-time Stanley Cup champion Curtis McElhaney.
All right, Andrew, thanks for joining us today. We're super excited to have you on the show here and really dive into some of the things that you've done, one, in your career, and two, a couple of the things that you're looking to do as you move forward with your career and possibly post-career as well. So first and foremost, I want to say congrats on 1,000 games. That's one of those accomplishments that it's pretty remarkable. And I was always a little envious of those guys that got to go out on the ice, do the ceremony, collect the silver stick, which is probably one of the coolest things I've seen. I did watch your 1,000 game tribute video, and it kind of seemed to be the who's who of the NHL in the last 10, 15 years. And some of the things that, those guys were saying about you, pretty remarkable. And I think just a testament to the person that you are and the career that you've had up to this point so far. So congrats on that. I do have one question though.
Yeah.
Did you ever score a goal on me? Is there a goal that I'm unaware of that may have gone in? Do you recall that? Obviously it's not one of those like highlight memorable things like where you scored on like Carey Price or Lundqvist or something like that, but
yeah. I don't have like a specific memory of it. So I might not have.
I don't know. It couldn't have been that important, right? I'm sure there's got to be a couple in there in one of those games.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they all blend together after a while. So I guess that's a good thing. It means you've scored enough goals to not remember a few. But, yeah, man, I can't off the top of my head figure out.
That's good. I appreciate that. Thank you. We'll just assume that I stopped them all. But how was that night?
Curtis, you don't want me to look on Google? You don't want me to see if I can find one?
We're not going to go there right now, but how was that night? Like, what is it like knowing that that's a lot of miles, and, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later, but it certainly probably wasn't all buttery smooth and 82 games every season. I know that for a fact. There's a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome in order to get to that point. So what was that night like for you, seeing all those familiar faces pop on there? I know the kids were on at the end. Your wife, Brandy, was on at the end. It was just, it's one of those things like watching it and, not really knowing you personally, it was kind of gave me chills. Like it was a pretty touching thing to watch.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was not, I was at 920 games 4 years ago. So the last 80 games were a grind. I was in the minors and didn't know if I'd ever have a chance to even get to 1,000 games again. And that was the goal when I was down there, was to give myself another opportunity to get to that number, which made it all the more sweeter. The people that are closest to you and that are there during the tough times, those are the people that you want to celebrate with when you hit those milestones. And that was my wife and my kids and my brothers and my parents and all my family and friends that were able to be there that night. So that to me was, such a cool moment.
We were just kind of chatting briefly about, obviously that's games played. So I finished my career with 249 games played. Nothing to write home about.
Well, but what's the big number for goalies?
So it's 500 games
500,
played.
Right?
Now, I have a little proposition that I would like to make to the league, and this is in particular for backup goalies. Obviously, I have a soft spot for them.
Yeah.
I dressed for over like 900 games. So, in my defense, I feel like since I sat on the bench for 500, I should at least get like a silver stool or something. Maybe I don't get the stick like the guys who played and really earned it, like yourself going to 1,000 games. But I'm saying, like, I watched a lot of hockey, and depending on who the coach was of that team, you know, some of those guys were taking stats. Like I had Babcock making me do face-offs, and he'd be coming to me in like the middle of the game, like wanting to know who's good on the left side in the offensive zone, and I'm flipping through all these sticky notes that he would make me take.
Well, I mean, and you know what it's like taking all the extra shots in practice and all the one-timers and all that crap you guys got to go through. So
I don't miss it, man. And I think that's more why we appreciate you coming on, because I know what those summers were like. And, you know, one of the luxuries now that I have being retired, it's like, I don't have to think about the summer training. If I want to go out and just kind of have a good time and relax a little bit, maybe go for a nice mountain bike ride, I have that luxury now. It's not about building and getting ready for the next 8-10 months to put your body through hell and beat it up over an 82 game schedule and potentially more after that. So I'm very fortunate that I'm not in your shoes right now, which I'm grateful for. So, you know, but one of the things that we're here to talk about today is in part the LAD Foundation, co-founder yourself, and really one of the initiatives that you guys are putting forward, which I believe is supposed to roll out coming up here in the fall. And that's the 16-16 initiative. And, you know, we'll just pass it over to you, and you can kind of give us a little rundown of what it's all about, how you came up with the idea, and really where you want and expect this thing to go as it moves forward and rolls out into the public.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it all kind of culminated with that 1,000-game goal, and really the adversity I faced at that point. I was in New York with the Islanders, signed a big contract, coming from Winnipeg, where, you know, as you know, a place I was comfortable with. I was captain of the team, and you come into a new situation, trying to fit in, and things, for whatever reason, just didn't fit. You know, I had a little, you know, struggle at the start. It was, I think my first year, I still scored 23 goals, but just couldn't find my game there. They ended up clearing house there, bringing Lou and Barry in. Missed that training camp with an injury, played 10 games that year, and had to have knee surgery on my right knee, had a meniscal repair. So it was out for 3 months, came back, started to play a little better, you know, got to 10 games again. And then someone took my other knee. We were playing the Coyotes, actually. Someone blindsided my knee and blew my other knee out, ACL, MCL, meniscus. So 2 major knee surgeries within a span of like 4 months, with the grind of both rehabs, and came back the next following training camp. And, you know, didn't feel great, but thought I felt good enough to at least get back in and work my way back to playing the way I could. Ended up, you know, had a conversation with Lou where it was like, hey, like, just go down to the minors, see if you can start feeling better, play some games. So I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I can do that. Understood where he was coming from, and just wanted the ability to start getting back into it. Thinking at that time, you know, it was going to be a short stint. And what turned, you know, started with a couple games in my mind, at least, turned into a couple months, and then the majority of that season. And during that time, I started to struggle mentally, just with like, what am I doing? You know, where am I right now? You know, 16 pretty successful years of playing at a high level. In my mind, I thought I could still play, but didn't really know a way forward. You know, I was miserable at the rink when I started down there. I was in my own head and absent at home with my wife and kids, and it just didn't really have a different way. And I, you know, I'd been really good at working hard, you know, putting my head down, burying my head, working hard, and grinding my way through whatever was in front of me for the most part. And at that point, I just didn't have a way forward and didn't have any guidance in terms of like, how can I get through this? What was the right course? So my wife finally was like, hey, like, you need to talk to someone.
Andrew, can I interrupt you? I apologize. I want to ask you a question. You know, when you play in the league for as long as you had at that point, you got to expect injuries. And I know you'd probably battled injuries prior to the knees. And at some point you expect those. But when you have those injuries and you know it's going to set you back, I'm sure the negative stuff coming in, right? The negative stuff you're building in your brain probably doesn't start out that way as overwhelming. It probably doesn't start as this could be the end of my career, is my guess. But at what point did you find it snowballing to those sorts of overwhelming negative things that were entering your head that you probably couldn't get rid of? I mean, was it right away? Was it after a few months? Was it after a year? How did that, because I think that's a big part of, this isn't something that overnight you just start developing issues, right? I mean, these things build for a while.
Yeah. And I think, the first part of that is just like the seed of doubt of like, okay, like, do I still have it? Can I still play? And that's where it starts. And, that's where it can end. Once you start practicing and having, getting in the habit of having the skills to deal with that. But, at that point, that was one thing I didn't have. So, it was really like, okay, like, man, like I just need, in my mind, I was like, I just need to play. But then, it's like at that moment, like every shift matters. You're like, okay, like they're watching me to see how I'm playing. Every shift matters. They're going to put me in this spot, which was such a different situation because as a young player, and Chris, you'll know this, like you spend your early part of your careers having that feeling of like, hey, I can't screw up here. Like, this is my shot. I can't screw up. Knowing that every mistake that you make is magnified, and depending on the coach nowadays, because I feel like it's shifted a little bit since when I was younger to now it's like the older guys, like, okay, we're waiting for them to slip up. But so that was that feeling that I had every time that I got on the ice. And now I know it's such an unhealthy way to enter any situation. Yeah. But when you're in that moment, like I said, I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how, like, what could I do to shift that when it started to come on? Like, what could I do to prepare myself in that moment to, have different thoughts or be excited about that opportunity? And like I said, when I was younger, I would just be determined and be like, okay, like, I'm just going to do whatever I can to get through it. And that worked for me. But at this point, I was older and I didn't have that, just the ability just to fight through and push through with just young, energetic passion. So,
It's funny because it is such a great mindset, like just to put your head down and you're going to barrel through this next wall. And it takes you so far, right? Like it worked growing up for the most part, and it worked for the early part of my career. Would I say that it was the most successful way to maybe handle that early part of my career? Probably not. But then all of a sudden, like for me, I really hit my wall, I think, where it was around 28, 29. And I had kind of started playing myself out of the league. And, the next year I was back in the minors, and it was all about trying to find a way to get back to the NHL. I actually made it back mid-season with the Coyotes, but it was just a call up. And then the next week when I got sent back down, I had this like massive injury that just kept me out of hockey for a good 9 months. And the only good thing about the injury was it prevented me from doing anything. I was completely, my rights got flipped to Columbus, I believe. I had their general manager call me and say, hey, any chance you can come play? And the Jackets were just in a tailspin at that point. And I called him. I'm like, man, I have a walker with tennis balls on it. Like, I'm 80 years old and I can't walk. Like, I'm shuffling around. I was living in Portland, Maine, was where our farm team was. And I was depressed. We had 2 young kids at the time. I didn't know where to go, and trying to kind of run through that wall wasn't going to be the answer for me. And, for me, I reached out to people kind of within my network. I didn't really go outside of it, but I'd be curious to know, like, where did you go outside of your existing network to kind of maybe find the resources that allowed you to kind of see a different path than just kind of putting your head down and grinding through it?
Yeah, I mean, there was two things. My wife was a huge part of that, and just giving me that wake up call of, like, that kick in the butt, go find someone to talk to. So I would say first and foremost her. The second was a teammate. The one saving grace for me was, like, there was another guy who was in the exact same situation that I was in, and we were making a 2-hour drive from Long Island to Bridgeport every day. 2 hours is a great time to have lots of conversation and talk about different things. And he was the first guy that I talked to about, like, hey, do you know anybody that is in this space that I could talk to? And luckily enough, he had a mental performance coach that he had spent the last year working with and really enjoyed. So he was like, yeah, I'll pass along his number. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. Go from there. So, and it was really that next conversation with, his name's Dan, that, started to set the course of, like, me changing how I thought about the situation that I was in, and starting to really build a lot of the skills and understand that there were so many skills that I didn't have. And there's so many skills out there that were available to me, or different ways that I could, try. If they worked, great. If not, okay, let's try something different. Same thing that we do physically. Hey, as an athlete, you're trying different things constantly. Does this help me get better? Does this help me get better? You take what you like, you throw away what you don't, and you move on. And it's just a constant learning process. And we do that physically, but we don't do it mentally, which I look back and I'm like, it's like, doesn't make any sense to me why, this hasn't been at the forefront of athletics and in the game of hockey at a young age, which is, kind of how we got into 16 and wanting to bring these skills to kids at a younger age.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the really exciting part that, when Dave brought 16 to me and, told me about the video that was, I think, put on at one of the Coyotes games, and we started talking about, just like the things that we're talking about right now, it's like, wow, what if I had this when I was younger and I was going through stuff? And, the wild thing about youth sports now, and we're seeing it everywhere, is we're all fathers, and it's so specialized, right? Like, the idea of just playing road hockey and having a good time and maybe going to a hockey school in the summer is gone. Everything is private training, getting ready for the tryouts, whenever those come about. And then it just doesn't end. There's no end in sight. And I can't imagine some of the things that kids are going through now, the things that we could probably look back on and reflect that we went through in our career is mild compared to what the kids are having to deal with today. And I think that's where 1616 has such a wonderful, opportunity to kind of really put this in front of them. And it's one, the kids, that are really going to benefit from something like this, but two, the parents and the coaches. And, maybe it allows us to take a step back, or maybe it just allows us to kind of fully understand situations that we're encountering and different ways to process them and to hopefully work around them, instead of constantly running into that wall and just thinking that we're at some point going to get through it. And that's not how it works. It's about finding a solution, and maybe there's another way to go around it instead of trying to run through it constantly. And, it's really encouraging. I'm really excited for it. I can't wait to hear the feedback that you'll receive. I know you've probably already gotten plenty so far when you rolled it out early on, but just to kind of see the overall effect it's going to have on some kids, that's pretty exciting stuff to know that's going to be out there soon.
Yeah. And to give people a rundown really of what the program's all about is, with 16 weeks of content that's focused on, connection, confidence, and character. And really how those three different things and the competence of playing hockey affect what's going on between your ears. And the more you can feel better about those, we call them the 4 C's, the better, first of all, the better you'll play. and second of all, the more enjoyable that whole experience is going to be. And then one of the cool things from our pilot program that we ran a 5-week pilot last fall, was, like you said, the impact it had on the parents that just said, oh, like, I never thought about it that way. Or, the coaches that, like, oh, I didn't know I had, like, what I was saying to the kids had that much of an impact on them, or what I wasn't saying. So really just bringing a lot of different things and concepts to light to say to parents and coaches, hey, this is why we're teaching this to the kids, and this is why it's important to them and to you, and really use it as a resource. So it's 16 weeks, almost like 16 digital mentors, we'll call it. So we're using real stories from NHL players, Olympic, female hockey players. We got a sledge hockey player, and just really every facet of our game to try to show kids that those same players are going through what they're going through at a young age, right? I mean, how many guys that get anxious before they play, or are worried about a mistake when they come off the ice because the coach is going to be pissed off? That doesn't change, or that have a hard time going up to a coach and having a conversation. Like little things that you're like, people would laugh, they like think like, oh yeah, like at 35 years old, you're nervous to go talk to the coach because you're not sure how he's going to react to you, wanting a different role. Like it's just silly things. And then the effect that has on the performance that player is going to have for your team, it is all very fascinating stuff. And I think a lot of people don't think that stuff goes on at our level. And definitely kids think that we have it all figured out, and we don't go through a lot of the issues that they have. So part of it is humanizing the professionals and allowing kids to relate to their stories. And then we have, so there's 3. So they get a video on a Sunday, and they watch the 5 to 6 minute video about the concept of the week. And we want those kids to have, thoughts and feelings about that video. And we want them to relate to that video and think about how it relates to them in their own life. And then we want them to take that concept out and live it out. We call it live it out. So how do we act that out this week in our lives and in the hockey world? So that's the weekly cadence. And then, like I said, there's also more material for parents and coaches with why this concept is important. Here's how you can support it with like conversation tips on the car ride home, which, in our world is a very important time. And just different ways to like catch, different way your kids are acting or, influencing them in a certain way. And then coaching, same thing. Just here's a concept, why it's important for you as a group and as a coach to understand why this is valuable for the kids.
You mentioned, Andrew, you talked about those apprehensions. You talked about, a 35-year-old player being nervous to go up to the management of the team or the coach or something and have a conversation. And in my world, we call those manifestations of apprehension. And it's these manifestations that you conjure in your brain, even though you've done a skill or you've done a task over and over again. And in my world, flying an airplane and certain aspects of that. And you've done it 100 times, but yet there are parts of it that still make you nervous, and you're nervous to confront it. And so then it got me thinking as we're talking about this, and I read an article, and I wish I could quote who wrote it so I could find it again. But I was reading about what is sport for? What is youth sport for? And the majority of people that play youth sports, so many parents look at it as a ticket to a college scholarship, but that's not a healthy approach. And what is youth sport for? It's to teach those things like physical activity, hard work, focus, teamwork, all those things, right? And so I think for years and years and years, when I was a kid growing up in the early 80s, that's what sport was for. It was to get off the couch, get out from doing stuff inside and going out and being physical. And you mentioned playing road hockey, Curtis. And so what is sport for? Sport is for those things. And what we're not doing is we're not teaching those skills that your foundation is addressing. And I pulled it up from your website, and I'm going to read it And so humor me here, because I think the people that are listening to this, if they don't go to the website, it's going to engage children with a unique and accessible opportunity to develop critical skills like resilience, integrity, empathy, leadership, and teamwork. Well, none of those are what I rattled off when what I think of as why youth sports are important. But those things that I read from your foundation are vitally important to developing skills as a person, whether you're going to be a lawyer, a surgeon, a teacher, a hockey player, a pilot. And so I think it's important to look at the skills that your foundation brings. It isn't to make NHL hockey players. It's to make good people, right? And to use sport as a way of developing things like teamwork, but also things like resilience and empathy and those mental aspects of it that you address. And I think it all comes full circle to looking at going, hey, these apprehensions that we face and not knowing how to handle them, it isn't unique to hockey, but your experience allows you to attack it from this avenue, which I think is really awesome. So
yeah, I
think that's an important aspect of it. For
sure. And it's the ideal environment to practice these things.
Yes.
So like you said, that conversation with, an adult or, coach that's nerve-wracking. The more you have that conversation, and I mean, everybody's been through that moment of like, oh, I'm really nervous to have this conversation because I don't know what the other person on the other side is going to say. And then all of a sudden you start making up in your own mind what that person's going to say, not giving them the opportunity to actually respond to you. And the more you practice that skill, the better you get at it. The more you understand that, like, oh, if I had that conversation, I'm going to personally feel better, and I'm actually going to know what that person thinks, and then I can go from there. So that's kind of a simple example, and we're talking about kids from 10 to 12 years old. So practicing like how you relate to mistakes. You talk to any professional, we all hate making mistakes, but we also understand that like that's how you learn. That's how you get better. Like you understand what you're not good at and what you're making mistakes at, so you can learn from that and move forward. If you're not learning from mistakes, then hey, that's an issue. Then we're not paying attention to the right things. But those are all opportunities for growth, and that's really what the program is about, like growth in different areas and being intentional with those things that you were talking about, the character building stuff, and it all affects between your ears. Right. Integrity's, in our program is doing the right thing when no one's looking. And the effect that like doing things for other people has on your brain and how you feel about yourself, it means a lot. And I think the earlier we can get that into kids and build the person, like you said, the better people we're going to have. And like I said, that's the ideal place to do it is within the sporting world. And we've completely gotten away from that.
Yeah, it's such a great quote that's on the website. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults, right? And, that's so true. You've talked about experiences. I shared some where, I'm 39 now, and there were things that I was dealing with that, like we said, if we explain that to someone, you'd be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, well, why? I'm just gonna barrel through this thing. Like I'll figure a way out. And the fact that at my age now, I don't even have some of the tools that I want my children to have is alarming. And it took a while to really figure out my way through situations. I think you can probably say something similar, but we're pretty stubborn individuals, right? Like that's kind of how you get to be at such a high level in anything. But at the same point, it probably holds us back in other areas because we're not open, we're not receptive to some things, and it becomes a challenge to try and figure those things out. So this is, as parents now, I think it's so critical. I want my kids to have all these tools in their toolbox. So when they go and they hit that wall, they have resources to kind of rely on and fall back on that will allow them to kind of, not sail through it smoothly by any means, but to understand that this is normal, what they're going through, and that the issues and things that'll come up in their life that's just a part of life. And it's, as long as they have tools to kind of get their way through it, I think they're going to be fine. That's all we want as parents, is we want our kids to come out successful, and it doesn't really matter what job they end up doing, but ultimately we just want them to be set up for life. And I think this program is a great way to kind of get that out into kids' hands at such a young age, which, it's going to be terrific. So, Dave, you have anything to add to that, or?
No, as I think about parenting, right, and I think about working with, my two boys at 7 and 4, I know that I have limitations in what I can do as their dad. And so I have to rely on other opportunities for them to learn from other adults that aren't related to them. And so I put them in hockey, and both of them play, because I want them to learn the lessons that I did playing sport growing up. But the opportunity now to look at a program like this and go, when my son's 10, he has the potential to be involved in a program like this where he can learn some of those things that I'm trying to teach him, that frankly, he's already exhibiting the stubbornness that I exhibited my whole life. And if I can get him in a program like this and teach him some of those other skills, it just gives me such hope. It gives me hope that as an adult, he isn't going to go through some of the things that I went through in my 20s. And if you joined us for episode 1 of the podcast, I talked a little bit about that. And so it just gives me hope. It makes me smile. And I'll tell you, I went to the game with my son, Nick, Andrew, where this was rolled out on the video.
Yep.
And I sat there, and my son and I, we didn't go get refreshments or hot dogs or anything. I just sat there and watched it. And my son looked over at me about 3/4 of the way through, and I had tears. I'm not going to lie. I sat there, and I had tear running down my eye, and he looked at me. He's like, "What's wrong, Dad?" And I was like, "It's just I'm watching this, and I'll tell you someday." He didn't understand. He's 7, but yeah, it got me all choked up, because I thought to myself, maybe I wouldn't have had the trials and tribulations I had as an adult if I had learned these skills, and at least been exposed to what the heck is going on inside of our brains. And
and I think
that's a big thing.
Sorry, I think it's also good to realize that we all that stubbornness is it's a good skill to have, right? It's gotten us pretty far in what we wanted to do,
right.
But there's also the time and a place for other skills to show up. And that's really the part of being intentional with what, I have one son who is kind and caring and always thinking of other people. But doesn't like to fail. That's, he has a tough time dealing with things he's not good at yet or right away. So I'm constantly, saying to him "Hey buddy, what's the first step to mastery?" I learned this great quote. And it's you got to suck at it. That is the first step. You suck at anything you've never tried before. And it's a constant thing. And it's a constant, hey, we're working on that all the time. And then I have another son who's, messes up, tries again. That's his gift right now is he has no problem trying and figuring things out, and he'll be determined and make as many mistakes as possible to do that. But also gets anxious already at 6 years old in big moments in games. So that's what he's working on. So it's a constant thing of being curious, paying attention to what your kids are good at, and then helping them realize how to get better at those things. Because I think in when we grew up, it was you're either just good at something or not, right? Yeah. How many times you hear that kid's just soft, he doesn't have it, right. And it was just write him off, right?
Yep.
So it's no, you as a coach, as a parent, you have that opportunity to help that kid in that moment, help them understand that hey, this is something you're not good at yet. You have the opportunity to grow in this space, and maybe here's a path forward, instead of just writing them off. Because the easy thing to do is to write the kids, the kids that maybe need a little more time and effort off. But the payoff of putting time into those kids and your own kids, when they get to our age will be huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's such a critical age now. So I coached both kids hockey teams this past year, and the talent pool that we have in Steamboat where I am is, you have some kids that are excelling, but everybody's on. We have one team, So, everybody gets lumped together, and the bottom line is like, hey, we need to pull everyone up and we need to move this group together. We can't just be carried by one or two individuals. And, and kids are astonishing. Like when you see some of the things you do, and it's probably one of the most parenting, well, a nightmare in some sense, but one of the most rewarding things that you can ever do. And having my kids a part of my career was probably one of the highlights of that career. And, just getting to see them in that environment was terrific. But, adding value to their life in some capacity, or adding value to another kid's performance or expectations within a sport is just such a rewarding feeling in it, and that's really what it's all about. And we're just trying to move these kids along and to set them up for the most success that they can have later in life. And, having tools as coaches, as parents, and as kids in the program is so critical to that. And, so it's coming out this fall, correct? You've got, how many teams were involved in it again?
So our goal, so we want to service 100 teams this fall. It's about $1,000 per team. Once we're still in the process of building out the last few episodes. Our goal is 100 teams. We've done like a preseason sign up just to gauge interest, and we're well over 100 teams already in different places across North America. So we're trying to drum up interest from just local organizations, local people that are interested in bringing the program to where they're at, and that's where we're going to start. So it's all going to be based on funding, because obviously the more funding we have, the more we can service more teams and more players and have a bigger impact. So we did the 5-week program. This season we'll roll out a 16-week program. And then the long-term goal is really to keep building out building out different age groups, so that, we got the 10 to 12, 13, 14, we'll be able to provide some more newer stories with more mature content. And then the same thing for 15, 16, and grow with the kids. Because as you know, it's a constant evolution of learning. And there's so much to learn in this space, and a lot of great stories within our game that I'm sure you've played with so many guys that have had all sorts of different trials and tribulations and things that pop up when you don't deal with the mental side of, or your mental health in general. So that's the goal. That's where we're starting. And like I said, we had good feedback from the pilot, lots of excitement. We've kind of tweaked and changed a few things from there, and we'll just keep evolving and going out to different NHL teams now to gauge their interest and supporting what we're up to, all those different things.
So if folks are interested in getting their youth program going with this 1616, can they just go to your website and all the contact information is there, how to get in touch and apply to start the program? Is that how it works? Yeah. So if you're interested in the program, well, like I said, there's a preseason sign up that you can pre-registration that you can put your name into, get your team into. They have to be from 10 to 12. So most teams will be within the 11 to 12 range, because I think the 10-year-olds, sometimes there's 9, 10, depending on. And that we chose that age group because that's research shows that that's the perfect time to start introducing these concepts, because the kids are mature enough to understand what we're talking about, and they're not too influenced by everything else going on in the world quite yet. So that's why we started. They can go on the website 1616.org, and you can, if you're interested in supporting us, there's ways to support and donate or connect with our executive director Meredith, who's been tremendous for us. And we're young. We're kind of like a startup, right? So there's a lot of things going on and a lot of opportunity from a getting involved standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, from a donor standpoint. Perfect. Yeah. We can bring this program digitally to so many different places, which is, I think, why I'm so excited about it. I think it's a quick trip to the website to get inspired in the effort, what you're trying to do. Some of these stats, I had no idea, but there's a stat in here on your website that said, as of 2020, suicide is the second leading cause of death among North American youth age 10 to 30, 10 to, I think it's 10 to 13 or 10 to 14. And then 50% of all mental illnesses begin by age 14. That's incredible to me. Incredible.
Yeah.
And so getting after that is again, it's inspirational. So huge kudos to you and the foundation and Brandy and your family. Like, holy cow, right? Those
Thanks.
Stats they're scary. It's just scary to read that, you know?
It is. And I mean, like, we've been affected, both personally and with our family. And, I played with guys that have taken their lives and guys who have struggled with addiction and alcoholism. So you live that. And I'm sure Curtis has seen that, and I'm sure you've seen that in your field too, which is the pressure that you're under, and you're looking for ways to release that pressure. So, it's something that the more I've gotten into the space, the more you're hearing other people's story. The more I've told my story, then people coming out of the woodworks to tell me their story, and it's been inspiring from that standpoint to just continue to do what we're doing, because it's gonna have a big impact.
Yeah, Curtis, you shared something with me. We were talking, and you shared a story with me of an experience you had in youth hockey where it was something that I think it's common among a lot of teenagers and preteens when they're playing sport is those things, those apprehensions of, am I good enough? Am I doing well enough? Am I going to make my parents happy? Am I going to make them proud of me by being a starter or something? And you told me the story of getting cut, and you almost, I don't want to steal your thunder from the story, because it's really moving, but I wonder if you could share it with us. And then I wonder if a program like this existed, if maybe you'd have been a little bit more resilient in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
But your dad came to the rescue.
Yeah. And right. Families, obviously that's always been a strong point for me, not only with my parents and siblings growing up, but now my wife and my kids in the house. So I've always had a wonderful support group. But yeah, when I was 12, right at that peak age of the program being rolled out, I relocated from Ontario out to Alberta. And, I'd kind of been tracking along, playing on all those AA, AAA teams in Ontario. And I moved out to Alberta with all these grand expectations that I was going to play for the Flames one day, right? That's my local team now, even though they weren't my favorite team. I was just going to play for the Flames. And so I go to the tryouts the first year, and I think they were called the Calgary Buffaloes. There was 3 AAA teams, and then there were 2 or 3 AA teams under that. And I was traded and cut by every single one of them in the span of like 2 weeks. And for me at that point, I had kind of like flipped the switch. So I was playing community hockey. I just wanted to quit. I told my dad, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to come up with some other way of finding a way to make money. And I had it in my head that I was going to be a doctor. And thank God I never followed through with that decision, because I don't have the smarts to be a doctor by any means. So, I think for me, I had the family support system that came to my rescue and really kind of just helped me stick with that. But I wish I had had some more tools, and what those tools would have allowed me to do was to process what I was going through at that point in time, and maybe been able to get through it a little bit better, because I went through that whole season and I was miserable. And the only reason that I ended up sticking with hockey was thanks to my parents. And, they drive you all over the place for those practices and those games. And, if it weren't for sticking with it and kind of having that family support system, I probably would have quit hockey. But I think if there had been some more tools in my toolbox, maybe it's a different story. Maybe I had stuck through that year and really grinded it out and kind of enjoyed that year of playing rec hockey more than what I probably did at that point in time. So, I kind of look at it as a regret, but at the same point, there weren't any really resources to kind of really help me get through those situations outside of having a family support system. And the unfortunate part is, not every kid has that wonderful family to kind of help them get through those moments. And, that's where I think 1616 really comes into play and can provide some tools. And if it's rolled out to teams, parents, and coaches, then all of a sudden it becomes a community, and it's not an individual thing that we're trying to work through. It's a community thing that we're trying to work through. And really that's where the strength will come from.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a good, cool story. We actually had like Al Montoya is one of our players for 1 week, and he tells us a story where like he quit hockey for a year when he was 13 or 14. He was just like not having fun. Like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And like you said, his mom got it at that point. She was a Cuban immigrant that had came over and worked 2 jobs so that he could play hockey, and was just like, okay, yeah. Like, if you don't want to play, like, I'm not going to force him to play. And he, people could tell he was talented, but he didn't like the pressure that was being put on him. And, and he still had a pretty damn good NHL career, and took a year off. And what most people nowadays would consider like, well, don't ever take a year off when you're 13 years old, right? To do other things and play other sports. So it's a good lesson for everybody.
Yeah, I think Al's one of those guys. I mean, I remember playing against him when he was at Michigan there, first round pick to the Rangers, I believe.
Yeah.
And, obviously coming in at a time where you have a guy like Henrik Lundqvist there isn't ideal, but certainly carved out a nice little career for himself. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. Like, even then he talked about like, hey, like coming in and trying to be like Henrik, and just the struggle of that for him. And it took him a while to figure out like, hey, I guess he just had to be himself and learn to see what worked for him. So I think that's been a pretty cool part of the program too, is like we do an hour Zoom with the players before we actually even get into building the story out. And when you tell guys that, hey, this is for 10 to 12-year-old kids, the stories that come out are way different than, the stories they're given in interviews to, ESPN or Sportsnet in Canada. It's just, they've been super forthcoming with what they've gone through, and I'm excited to see like the impact of those stories.
Yeah. And
I think there's still, sorry, Curtis. I think there's still a stigma too about being open and telling the story. So anybody that's willing to do it is aces in my book, because it takes a lot of guts to share some of the deeper, darker stories that people have gotten. And a lot of people have them, but they guard them and they keep them hidden.
Yeah. Sure. And that's really the beauty of it. And, Andrew, we just want to thank you for your time today, and really say, the fact that you are still playing actively right now while rolling something like this out and really paying it forward is truly what makes you a remarkable human being. And, Dave and I are both so grateful that we came across this program. I know we'll both be pumping it on our end to make sure that it gets into all the hands that it can possibly get into and grow as much as it possibly can. But, just honestly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking the time to put something like this together for the kids and the future of youth sports and the impact that it's going to have moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And like I said, when we first chatted, I think being able to have these conversations with people that are invested in the same space as we're in, and being able to give back to the next generation is something that I'm all for. So I look forward to going down this journey and having you guys along for the ride.